get started. Welcome to our campfire this month, you all, and it is themed around Dr. King and restorative justice, what justice looks like in relationship. So happy to have you all here. I give this spiel every time because it grounds us in the campfire idea of why do we call it a campfire, right? Why is it that? Well, we know that in general, a campfire is all about gathering and storytelling and relationships. At a campfire, you'll find it to be a place of warmth, right? For us here in Circle, that means a place where we're able to bring our full selves and be met with care. We also know that a campfire is a place where we get to tend different embers, right? Those for us are those small practices that keep the fire of restorative justice alive. We also know that a campfire is a place of reflection. We get to share wisdom, wisdom across roles and generations and experiences. And just like in a campfire where folks are sitting in a circle, imagine today that we are in a circle space where we get to share individually something valuable to us. So, welcome to this virtual campfire. If this is your first time here, we really extend our welcome. And if you have been here before, we welcome you again and again. And we're so grateful that you continue to show up and be a part of this space. So, welcome to the campfire, you all. All right, you found yourself here. I want to tell you a little bit about who we are. We are the Community Restorative Justice Hubs, basically a community-led collective. And we come together to do a few things. Number one, support each other. There's not a whole lot of work happening that really allows us to really tap into one another, collective power. So we're here to support one another. And as we're supporting one another, we are transforming lives and systems by advancing restorative justice. We are a collective of 8 organizations all together, rooted in Chicago neighborhoods that has been most impacted by violence or systematic harm. We also use a trauma-informed lens in our work, providing some opportunities for reconciliation, healing, and growth. And we collaborate for the sake of building stronger, healthier communities through restorative practices. Together, we share a belief that everyone deserves to be safe and whole, and a big vision to be in right relationship with one another. So that is who we are at the Community Restorative Justice Hubs. And later on in this session, you'll actually have an opportunity to hear from one of those hubs, Kenwood Oakland Community Organization, one of their youth mentors who will come in and sort of talk about this deep relationship between King and RJ. So super excited for that. To paint the picture even more, we're going to spend some time really checking in with one another. We'll spend some time having a conversation around Dr. King and restorative justice. And I'm so excited to introduce to many of you all Emma, who is here on our team, who's really going to lead us in that conversation. We'll fuel our flames with that conversation from Coco, and we'll have an opportunity to share some key takeaways and commitments from the space. All right, y'all ready to dive in? Ready to dive in? Here we are. So, to center us, there is a quote on the screen here, and it's directly from Martin Luther King Jr. from Where Do We Go From Here? A really powerful speech. I'm wondering if there is someone who might be willing to read this for us. Anybody at all? Want to unmute and read the quote?
All right. Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice.
Powerful. I'm gonna give us a moment to just sit with that. That's a lot. Let's sit with this. And I also would love some reflections here. If there's anything that's sticking out within this quote, right? I'm thinking of these words of power, love, right? That balance there. The word anemic is sticking out to me today, right? Power being cold. Any reflections from you all of what's sticking out to you in this quote?
Yeah, I agree, Carla. I think the anemic piece, like just kind of detailing how cold it is to have love without power. Um,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of times we kind of try to like disassociate one from the other. And I think it's important to know that both of those can work, can coincide together. But it's hard to see that because we don't really have too many examples of that.
Right. I agree. I agree. Thanks for sharing, Rodney. Anyone else want to share some reflections from this? And if not, I invite us into a even deeper reflection around power and love. Where does love feel strong in your work? That is our check-in question. Where does love feel really strong in your work? I know for me, working with the RJ Hubs, whenever I'm in community with them, seeing their participants, in action. We have Marlon on the call here from Precious Blood. Whenever I step at Precious Blood, it feels like love. I feel the love and the connection, right? And also, where does power show up? Right? For me, just having to write some grants, I'm thinking about just the tug of war between what funders ask of us and the power dynamics and the needing to search for money to fuel the work, right? Seems to be a bit of a power imbalance oftentimes. Anyone else want to share? Where are you feeling the love right now in your work? And where's the power?
I can jump in. I've been seeking community in my own neighborhood, especially around all of the violence that we're seeing happening with ICE and federal agents and things like that. And I feel like just seeing all of the different people come out that are in my community that I don't always see, getting to like make those connections and see those faces and know that everyone's coming out of a place of love has been really fulfilling.
It's real. It's real. Thank you, Emma. Yeah. Anyone else want to add in here?
Yeah, I definitely think, when it comes to working with youth, families, community, I think that's when the love is felt strongest in the work. I think it's maybe not even if it's a time where whether we feel it or not, but do the people that we're pouring into if they're feeling it. And I think that that's a big deal because a lot of times with the work, when we talk about restorative justice, most people that aren't familiar with the work, they're not associating with anything positive. So once they get exposed to it, it's kind of like a flip. It's kind of like a light switch, and a lot of times, and it's just about building trust and things as well. So I think it takes a couple of, it might even be the first client meeting, depending on how engaged you are. But I definitely think you feel the love strongest when you're actually like in the field doing the work. And I think the power is felt within us as like facilitators, community leaders, organizers. I think the question is what are we doing with our power? One, do we recognize the power that we have? And two, what are we doing with the power that we have?
Yeah. And using that power to even build more collective power, right? Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I want to turn it over to Emma now to sort of guide us as we tend to tend these embers of our practice to guide us in a facilitated conversation. Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, thanks, Carlin. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Emma. I'm an intern here at the RJ Hubs, and I've been super excited about this conversation. I'm going to walk us through a couple slides, and on top of each of them, there's a quote from Dr. King. So I'll invite us to kind of read this and let it guide the conversation that we'll have in each slide. So the first one is, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we know Dr. King emerged in a context of legalized racial segregation and state violence against Black communities. His mission wasn't just reform, it was about fundamentally transforming how society responds to conflict, harm, and inequality. Dr. King tirelessly fought against institutionalized racism and systemic inequalities, really highlighting the need for structural transformation. Restorative justice echoes this call for change by challenging the traditional punitive justice system that we have today. And we'll walk through what that looks like in action in the next couple of slides. Do you want to click to the next one, Carlin? The quote on the top of this one is one that I really like. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. So Dr. King, we know, openly condemned police brutality, militarism, and the use of force to maintain segregation, arguing that the state's legitimacy depends on justice, not coercion. RJ recognizes that harm caused often stems from broader societal issues such as poverty, inequality, lack of access to education or opportunities, lots of things that the RJ hubs are working to um, correct or improve for folks. By addressing these root causes, restorative justice aims to prevent harm. It ensures that the focus shifts from a narrow view of punishment towards a more holistic approach that fosters individual growth and community well-being. So if you take a look at the slide, you can see a chart, and this is kind of a framework for how we view responding to harm within a restorative justice lens. So instead of the traditional questions that we might be asking today, like who broke the rule, what punishment is deserved, or approaches to this, like just removing the person or sending them into isolation, we're challenging that by saying who was harmed, what repair is needed, how can we restore this relationship through love and care, and how can we reintegrate this person back into society. And so, reflecting on this, I want to ask a question to the group. Um, where do you think we see, or where do you think we default to these traditional ways of punishment in our own lives? This might be what we see in systems today, or even more on an individual level about our interpersonal relationships. Like, how do we respond to conflict when a friend has harmed us? Um, are we thinking, what am I going to do to get back at this person potentially if there's feelings like that? Or are we thinking, like, how am I going to call this person in instead of just calling them out? Um, and what would a nonviolent response require us instead? So I'll leave it open and just pose this question to the group and see if anyone has any thoughts.
Emma, I'm grateful for this nudging. I like to say that restorative justice calls for us to do our own mirror work, right? I think like we're always so excited to look at the big systems, right, and how they need to be transformed, whether it be our criminal justice system, and its inherent punitive responses. But this chart, like you said, it makes us to think about our own friendships, right? And how am I responding to the individual people in my world who might have caused harm or there needs to be repair in those. So I appreciate that nudging for us to look at how this is showing up in our own world. Yeah. I'm curious, we're curious what you all also are thinking about on this chart, on this slide. What are some of the ways in which you sort of default to some of the punitive responses? Or maybe you want to share some ways in which you've grown to train your mind, your body, your spirit to think about the restorative responses instead.
So I'll chime in uh, with my children and say that when a fight breaks out between a 9-year-old boy and an 8-year-old boy, uh, I think before restorative justice, I could see why it's so easy to go straight to the offender, the kid who is harming the other kid, and focus all of your attention on that child. But I have changed the ways in which I address my children, and I will ask the one who's being harmed, what do you need? Instead of me coming up with a punishment, like, what do you need right now? Instead of me sending your brother to his room, what else can you articulate about what you need at this moment instead. So I'm training them to not think punitively while I'm helping them also articulate, like, okay, wait, actually, I want him to play with me. I don't want you to send him to his room because I want to play. I just don't want him to punch me while we play. Okay, let's check in with your brother. Can you do that? Can you stop punch? Okay, yes, hands to self. We got it. Moving on. So that's what I got every day, a challenge.
I love that reflection, Christine. Anyone else have a thought? If not, that's okay.
Uh,
I think these
I
are,
think
yeah, go
can
ahead.
you hear me?
Yes.
Marley. I think it's a complex situation because of the learned behavior that we kind of grow up with, especially in our community, the black, and that you if you do something, you put your hand in the cookie jar, you take the cookie, not you get a spanking. And you learn that you're taught that from a child all the way until sometimes an adult until you run into till I was able to run into restorative justice and start to learn about trying to find out the root cause of the problem and not just what's on surface and what happened, and to be able to take the narrative of two harms, that because everybody's been harmed, you've been harmed and somebody else been harmed as well, and to take that and try to come to a common ground where we can find a common solution. Um, that's kind of like where that's before restorative justice. I was used to traditional ways. You make a crime, you should go to prison, you should do this. This is how life is. This is just how you like. This is what it is. You do something, you get punished. Um, once I was introduced into restorative justice at Precious Blood, it was more so of a let's find out the why. Let's get to the common cause of the problem and try to make a solution for everybody where we all can live collectively. That's the beauteous part about restorative to me, and it's not of big I or little you. This is something we're going to make a decision about collectively. It's not somebody speaking down saying this is what should happen. Let's figure this out together, where we all can come out with a win, if I say.
Yeah, I love that, Marlon. I like the highlighting of the mutuality there.
Yes, dope. I want to comment, I want to highlight a couple things that's coming up in the chat as well. Tom commented on workplaces, on how we often result to punitive responses. And I think that shows up a lot in our policies, right? And just like traditional HR structures. So that's a good one. And thank you, Mika, for adding in that schools, right, can result to punitive measures as well. When we think about suspensions and in-school detentions and all of the ways that prevent us from doing the work that Christine mentioned of what do you need in this moment, right? What repair is needed? How do we repair this relationship? How do we reintegrate? So good stuff. Emily, you want me to keep it going? Next
Yes,
slide.
please.
There we go.
Thanks, Carlin. Thanks for that conversation on nonviolence too. So moving on, we'll talk a little bit about human dignity, and I want to highlight the quote at the top that every man, human being, is an heir to a legacy of dignity and worth. So Dr. King fought to dehumanize not only in law, but in language, culture, and consciousness. King fought dehumanization, sorry, not fought to dehumanize, the reverse. The restorative justice extends that work by creating processes where people who caused harm are encouraged to take responsibility without being cast out as irredeemable. It affirms that accountability is not about erasure or exile, it's about repair, growth, and reintegration. And in both frameworks, justice is not achieved by stripping someone of their humanity, but by calling them more deeply into it. So we've got another chart here to look at some of the like traditional dehumanizing responses that we might use, such as labeling someone, shaming them to control, excluding them indefinitely, or saying that they're the problem. I want to kind of focus into on the dignity-centered responses that we can use instead of those. So one of them is naming the behavior instead of labeling the person. I think there's been a really wonderful movement too towards using more person-centered language that really reflects this commitment. So, for example, instead of defining someone as an offender or criminal or perpetrator, restorative justice invites us to say a person who caused harm. Instead of victim, someone might say a person who was harmed, because this both recognizes the agency and complexity into what happened. The other points on here are things like conducting dialogue to repair. So having circles, engaging in that kind of restorative conversation, reintegrating with accountability, and asking, there's recognizing that there's harm that's been happening, but asking how we can address it collectively. So I'm going to pose another question after we kind of reflect on this. What are ways that you see dehumanizing language or actions occurring in your work? And what examples might you have that you use in terms of language or dialogue that actively work to reject or respond to this?
One thing that's huge with me, and I always hear this when I'm talking, especially when we talk to government and things like that, but they say that we're working with at-risk youth. I hate that because when you say at risk, aren't we all at risk, right? Everybody is at risk, and you're labeling, young individuals as at risk. I just like to say the individual, the young adult or something like that, and get rid of that at-risk part.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Also, something that's big, and this is something else, because somebody mentioned workplace. But why should it be a space where asks me about my nationality, even on a job application? That shouldn't even have anything to do with the job. Why is that even a question of my ethnicity on a job application? That should just be took off every application it is, in every job application it is.
Yeah, another great point. It really highlights how there's so much more to us than just these labels that the system puts on us.
Emma, I'm thinking about something that has to do with like an example I think about often, which is that my partner, he went to Montessori school for primary school. And I grew up in a very like traditional household, like in Asia, like you get beat sometimes and you're told you're a bad kid. And so I asked him, how did like his teachers and parents like respond when he had tantrums or other kids had tantrums? I was like, were you never told that you were a bad kid? Because he doesn't seem to be that type. And like was ever told those things. And he said, yeah, I was never told that I was a bad kid because we don't really look at things as black and white. They would name the behavior, as you mentioned, and say like, oh, the noise you make, it's really disruptive and it's like loud. It's hard for us to all talk when you do these things. And so you're kind of like being told to be more empathetic, but at the same time, it's not a black and white judgment of whether, oh, you're so noisy, oh, you throw tantrums, oh, you're a bad kid. And so I think that has like benefited him in life and that he's able to see a lot of things in like a spectrum and in a gradation, but also I feel like people around him have been really careful on like making sure that you name behaviors instead of labeling people. And that's had a really transformative effect on his life.
That's an awesome example, Mika. Thank you so much for sharing that. Alrighty. We'll move now to talking a bit about what justice looks like in right relationship. And I want to read the quote again at the top here. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. I want to sit with that for a second. That's a really powerful quote, and I think speaks really directly to right relationship and restorative justice. And it's definitely something that I'm going to be thinking on for a while. What does justice look like in right relationships? So, Dr. King was saying that none of us exist in isolation. Our lives are morally and socially connected. This is exactly the foundation of restorative justice, which sees harm and as a rupture in relationships and justice as the process of restoring those relationships. This directly mirrors the RJ Hub's mission, too, to build justice through community, connection, mutual accountability, and shared healing rather than punishment. So just as Dr. King envisioned a society free from hatred and discrimination, restorative justice offers a path forward towards a just and equitable future where empathy and forgiveness prevail and all individuals are treated with dignity and respect. I'll leave it there for a second and kind of open the floor up now just for some thoughts and reflections on this. Maybe anything that's coming up to you about justice and right relationship or accompaniment or mutuality in the work that you do. And also, if there's anything lingering from the previous slides, whether it has been the material we went over, the quotes, anything that might have spoken to you.
Yeah, when I see that first note or just talking about justice and right relationship, I think it's important to know that right relationship is, in my opinion, at least I think is more people based. Like I think there's 12 of us on in this virtual meeting. 12 of us might have 12 different ideas of what right relationship is. And so I think that is kind of speaking to like building a relationship with the person that you're trying to, seek accountability through or from. So I think it's important to define what is like right relationship, even introducing that concept to people that we serve or in community. That's something that a lot of people really haven't heard before. So I think that that's important. And I like the note of healing requires mutual accountability and collective repair because healing is something that we're all seeking to do as individuals, but it's a collective effort because 9 times out of 10, someone has caused harm to us where we're seeking out healing, or we might need healing from something that we might be thinking of ourselves or like, second guessing ourselves. And so it's important to just have that support system and encouraging like that collective repair because it's overall like contributes to collective well-being. Oh, which is that last line. Yep. So it's good.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Rodney. Anyone else have any thoughts or reflections? Maybe any other examples of how this shows up in your work or your day-to-day?
I think this kind of piggybacks off of what we've been talking about, even with our reframing of language, right? Of how harm is not an individual thing, right? Like when a harm happens, it definitely has that ripple effect across communities. And I think when we are actively choosing to be in right relationship, with each other, it really calls for us to name that, right? That interdependent, that interconnectedness that we see. So that one is like really sticking out to me. And I think Dr. King's quote is such a tall order here. Like it's such a tall order to say, like, I'll never be who I'm supposed to be or where I'm supposed to be if you're not where you're supposed to be, right? It's like, wow. So my mission, my goals, everything is wrapped up in the person next to me and how they're showing up and what they need. And I think that is just it's such a beautiful but tall order, right? Yeah. So that's my reflection. Curious if anyone else has anything else that's showing up for them in this as well.
Mika dropped a comment in the chat, so I'll go ahead and read this for us. There's a philosopher named Martin Buber who outlined two ways that people engage with the world, I, thou, and I, it. Buber said that authentic existence is really in relationship when we see others in the world as thou rather than it. Therefore, acknowledging their full being, mistakes, beauty, all of themselves, instead of treating them as a tool or a means to an end or an object. I think Dr. King takes this philosophy further by highlighting all of our roles or mutual accountability. I really love that, Mika.
That was awesome. Thank you all for that discussion. All right. Well, while we're waiting on Khalil to rejoin us, I want to just give a shout out to one of our organizations that is a hub. And I'm grateful because we have one of our hubs already represented. Um, we have Precious Blood represented by Marlon, so grateful for you. Kenwood, I think, is a very unique hub because they really do carry a deep legacy of organizing and community leadership on Chicago's South Side. Like it is huge. And since their founding in 1965, like they've really created a space where community members are really building power, where community members are developing leaders and organizing. Organizing is so core to their work. They recently hosted an event called King and Kenwood, where they had an opportunity to really reflect around King's visit here in Chicago, and it was just such a powerful experience. We are joined not just with Khalil, who will be joining us in a little bit, but Tamara as well, who represents Coco. And I would love to just sort of have a little guided conversation with you around, first of all, if there's anything else you want to share about Coco as an organization, maybe you can paint a broader picture. Tell us who you are and what your role looks like. And then I would love to kind of talk a little bit more about this connection with Dr. King and RJ.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. I just want to let you know Khalil actually might not be hopping on today. Reverend Jesse Jackson, of course, was one of our first executive directors, and his viewing is today. So a lot of our staff are actually there at the viewing, just kind of there in support of the family and the organization. So Khalil is actually at that event, so he won't be joining us because there's no phones in the space. But Coco is an awesome organization. My name is Tamara Way. I'm a youth organizer here at Coco. I came into the organization about 2 years ago, actually as a intern through Public Allies, and they liked me enough to just hire me full time. So I spent a lot of my time here, honestly, doing girls mentorship program, which we are in like 4 different schools, and we really just cultivate and navigate sisterhoods and the schools around the community. I also do a little bit of working with our older youth, so our high school youth with our youth council. They meet at least every other Wednesdays to kind of navigate and discuss some of the issues in their communities and also some campaigns related to which you just had a photo up of our Girls Lead campaign, which features our We Walk for Her March, which we do every year. That also is a big aspect and part of my work. I kind of lead and facilitate that march. So I mean, I love it here. It's a good organization. The multi-generational aspect is amazing. I think I've learned so much, not only from the peers that I work with, but also from, our seniors that come into this space every day and bring livelihood and knowledge, especially about King that we learned during that King versus Kenwood event. So, I mean, I'm just glad to be a staff member here.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. So you just alluded to it, right? The King and Kenwood. And I know not only did you participate, like you really hope to lead that. Can you kind of share the motivation behind that event that you all threw, and sort of what that meant for you?
Absolutely. I think that what really transpired and kind of like had us become like one of the representatives of Coco in that speaking engagement was that the bishop of that church, he wanted to put on the event and he thought that a good partner would be Coco. We already have communications with that church doing our like monthly health market, which is an event that we have our seniors come to. They can pick up like fresh fruits and vegetables. Sometimes we'll have individuals there to maybe like check blood pressures and stuff. So because we already had that pre-existing connection with him, he decided that we would be a good partner and to segue and kind of like the conversation around this event. A part of me also being there as a panelist was really just wanting to have somebody who works directly with youth, who works directly with organizing, and who can kind of be like that voice for the younger generation. And I think that was really important in that event because not only do I think I learned so much from them. I think coming from a perspective of a young person, they learned so much from me or like from myself and Khalil being panelists. I think when you have an event where it is kind of like intergenerational and you have all of these people from all of these different ages, it's definitely a source of knowledge. You know, we learn from them, they learn from us. And that's how you keep having things transition. And I think the biggest part of that was kind of keeping King's name alive and keeping like the things that he's done. Um, Alive because we had so many people on the panel who kind of talked about their personal experience, who were there that day and who gained knowledge simply just from being in King's presence when he appeared in that church to talk about kind of like the educational disparities within the community. So it was a great event. I had a great time and I was just honestly proud to be considered for a panelist.
That's amazing. I feel like when we talk about Dr. King, we highlight so many of his speeches, right? I'm curious if there's anything from that particular event that revealed him as a community organizer, and what you might have taken away or learned, given the fact that Coco is so deep in community organizing as well. How did you make those connections?
I think the way that I made those connections was one of the panelists. I can't remember her name, but she actually is a young lady who is a representative at Push. And she was there that day that King came and he went into Kenwood in the church and he kind of like gave his spiel about education and the disparities in it and kind of like the integration of the two schools. But I think that I gained so much knowledge simply from her presence because she had been there that day. Me being kind of the younger generation, of course, I've never met King, so I haven't been fully influenced in a personal aspect, of course, like me sitting in his room, but being in a space where I was able to gain that knowledge from somebody who has met him, who has touched him, and who has been able to kind of like firsthand see the impact that he had over the community was great. She talked a lot about how like when he came in, he spoke to everybody, he took pictures. It was kind of just like a moment where you have that person not only in the community but being a part of the community. People can enter the community, they can give their speeches, but sometimes people will not engage with the community. And I think the biggest part in community organizing is remembering that engagement with the community, being a part of the community, integrating yourself in that community and learning from that community. And I think that honestly kind of was one of my biggest takeaways from King. He's traveled plenty of places, he's given plenty of speeches, but I don't know many people who travel, who give speeches, and who integrate themselves in the community to learn more about that community. So I think her kind of like discussion about how he touched her in that moment, hearing his speech and being in his personal presence, really kind of just made me grateful for the aspect of people who come into communities, not only to kind of like give their opinions, but also to get the opinions of others who are firsthand, who's like firsthandedly impacted by the things that are going on. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful, and it really does tie back to what we've also been talking about in this campfire already about being interdependent, right? So it's like King isn't just the type, was not the type of organizer that was like here and then gone. Like to your point, being deeply rooted and knowing that, like, my destiny is tied to yours, mine is tied to this community. I think that's really beautiful. Is there anything when you think about Dr. King, that event in particular, that really challenged how you understand Dr. King or his
Hmm.
movement? Challenge or affirm? We can go either or.
I think what really kind of affirmed his movement really is kind of like the legacy. Like when we put on the event, we didn't know what the turnout was going to be. We didn't know who was going to show up, but we had young people in the space. We had seniors in the space. We had churchgoers in the space. And I think that's the biggest part of kind of what it is that we do. When we have those young people in the space, we are allowing ourselves to really put them in a position where they are continuing to learn about that legacy, about who this person was and about the impact that they've had over the community. So I definitely felt like his legacy was affirmed just with having the intergenerational aspect of people within that community sitting and gathering for an event that that like really reflected on who he was as a person. People got out of their beds. It was late at night, but they came to really remember what happened that day and to also give their knowledge about what they've experienced and how he touched them as a person. So I think it was really heartwarming to see who came out, who participated, and who understood and kind of knew how important, what King did that day when he came in that church was.
So, any other reflections or thoughts you want to share? I'm curious if there's any connections that you make to Dr. King and restorative justice, as that's been like the thread we've been like making in this session.
Absolutely. So I don't do restorative justice here at Coco. Like that's not in, of course, my title. But I don't know if you know of North Lawndale College Prep. There I was kind of like what we call a peace warrior. And we did a lot of like restorative justice aspects in that school. And one of the things that we followed was his Kingian principles of nonviolence. So those kind of really tie into who I am as a person because that's something that I learned back at my high school in the work that I was doing. So while I don't do restorative justice here, I do have a background in restorative justice. I have a background in those Kingian principles of nonviolence. And that's something that since having been learned, I carry with me to this day. And I am very appreciative that I was able to learn.
If anyone else have questions or thoughts that they want to share, now is a good time. Any questions or thoughts coming up for you all, given that mini conversation? Awesome. We're grateful for your time and for you being able to come in and talk about Coco, the work that you all are doing, the organizing you all are doing, and just the deep or contributions you all are making um, in terms of Dr. King, but also our late Reverend Jesse Jackson. So thank you so much for that. Yeah. I want to
Absolutely.
turn,
Thank you so much.
sure, Rodney.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for Miss Wade. I know you said that you had four schools in the girls' mentorship. What other programming do you all do with Coco?
So we actually do a lot of programming. So I'll start kind of like with a little bit of the in-school programming. So there is actually programming for both young ladies and young men. Our girls
Mhm.
program is called United Sisters, and our boys program is called Boys to Men. Currently, we are in four schools around the neighborhood, which includes Mollison, Persian, Ariel, Bronzeville Classical. Yes. Um, Aside from that, we have our youth council, which is when we have our high school students come in every other Wednesday and they kind of engage in navigating conversation around issues within their communities. That's part of the way that our youth campaigns come into play. So a lot of our youth come into that space. They help facilitate what goes on in the We Walk for Her March. And then we also have like a event called Coco Fest, which they come in and they also help facilitate and really kind of engage what goes on with that event as well. Outside of those two things, we have a program called Brownsville Neil, which focuses on tech, entrepreneurship, and trade. And we have young people from the community come in too, and they learn about those things. They go on trips and they kind of like engage with learning about those experiences. And sometimes they'll even get like what's the right word? Like an apprenticeship or something through a trade that they might have went and kind of viewed. What am I missing? We have our ACE program. That's our after school program with our littles. It's just kind of like a homework help program. They come in, they do homework, but they also kind of learn about art. They do gymnastics. They have like several vendors who come in and work with our littles, and that's really engaging as well. I'm trying to think, am I missing anything? We honestly are so well rounded. We do a lot of things here,
Like no
but those are
doubt. No,
just
this is
that's
great.
just some of them, of course, that I can think of on top of my head.
That's all good. I appreciate it. Now y'all doing great work. Keep going.
Absolutely.
And I dropped the link to Coco's website in the chat if anyone else just wants to tune in and check it out. Do you all have any upcoming events coming up? I know there's always some in the works, but if it's something you want to highlight
Absolutely.
that you know.
We actually have family night tomorrow. I want to say it's from 5 to 7. Family night is really just an engaging event that we do with community members. So we do a family night. It's intergenerational. We typically will give flyers to all of the schools in the area. We'll give flyers to our seniors, and it's really just a space for the community to come in, break bread with each other. There's typically bingo going on in the senior section. For our little, sometimes we'll have like PlayStations or Nintendo Switches or little like gaming stations around. Also, of course, like little like Connect Fours or just things kind of like to keep them engaged, but to also know that there is a space in their community that they can come, that they can have fun, that they can talk about their issues, but they can also come and create these relationships with other people in their community that they may not have known existed. But of course, family night is open to all. There, of course, is also food and beverages that come along with our family night. So you guys should stop by if you are not doing anything tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you. We're so excited. There's a question in the chat of how you can stay connected. Coco has a really great newsletter that they put out. Any other ways that you might recommend? We like using
Absolutely.
you to give all the plugs.
We do have a really great newsletter. Depending on what area you want, you can always call. And if there's a specific area that you want to kind of focus in on, whether it's our seniors, our housing, our youth, you can call. You can ask to speak to one of our organizing in one of those departments. They can let you know about upcoming events or kind of things that they might have going along in coalitions or whatnot. If that's something that you're interested in being a part of. If you want, you can also leave your information with me and I can steer you in a direction of anything that you want to do related to volunteering or navigating conversations with somebody else in one of those areas of focus that you'd like to maybe learn more about or volunteer in. And I can drop my email in the chat as well, for those of you who have more questions or, of course, want to connect.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, I appreciate that. As we sort of get ready to wrap up or carry the torch, I want to invite us into like a chat conversation, completing a sentence. Is there a shift that you feel called to make, right? This could be based off of our conversation, a shift that you now want to make within your personal life. We talked a lot about reframing our language, right? Using strengths-based language. Is that a shift you feel called to make or lean more into? Or maybe it's something that you want to take back to your organization. I would love for us to load up this chat, completing the sentence here. The shift I feel called to make is. Let's see what comes. And thanks, Samara, for dropping your email in the chat as well. We appreciate that. Anyone can drop it in the chat.
The shift I feel called to make is changing my perspective. Sometimes I feel like I got the answers. Sometimes I feel like I can help solve people problems, and sometimes you just don't got the answers. Sometimes you just meant to be in the space to be supportive, to hold a hand, to lend an ear, to, give a hug if needed. So I think it's just important to shift your perspective and do a little bit more learning and a little bit more listening, less talking.
Thanks so much, Ronnie. Anyone else want to drop theirs in the chat or share out loud? Yes, calling people in rather than out. Yes. Mika says, I'm very prone to be either or thinking, and I want to make the shift to see the complexity and beauty and answers that don't come easy. Thanks, Tom. Putting more work into engaging my neighbors and my community. Yeah. Elena, thanks for dropping in the chat the King Center Institute. I appreciate that. Meditating on this. I love it. I love it. Thank you all. Let's lean into these shifts, right? Let's lean into these shifts. And finally, I just invite you all to stay connected. I always love, Emma loves, our team loves to stay connected. So I dropped my email here on the screen. Reach out for a one-on-one. We'd love to connect with you. And our next campfire is going to be in March. And it's going to be the last Thursday in March, where we're going to be talking about restorative approaches to community grief and collective healing. We're going to highlight precious blood in that particular conversation, as they do so many beautiful community healing circles, especially with moms, right, who've lost children to gun violence or incarceration. And they'll be able to share some approaches that they use, really centering circles around community grief and collective healing. I dropped that link in the chat. Feel free to register in advance. And as always, we want your feedback. We want to know how we can improve these sessions, what we could be doing more of, what you would like to see. So I definitely invite you all once again to complete that survey. Give us some feedback on this and let us know how you're feeling about these sessions. All right, you all, it's been a pleasure. Let's go forward carrying Dr. King and restorative justice within our work, within our personal lives, and within our communities, because we really are well connected. Take care, everyone. Thanks for having us. Thanks for joining.
Have a good one.
You
Thank
too.
y'all. Appreciate y'all.
Take care.